Pretty revolutionary claim that might just rewrite the rulebook. And this quote right here from Professor Murad Sultan Izui really gets to the heart of our story. It's basically a direct challenge to a belief that's been set in stone for centuries. It suggests that what we think of as an unbreakable wall might just be a hurdle we haven't figured out how to get over yet. So let's get on the same page about what we're talking about here. These are high degree polynomial equations. Think back to your algebra class, but then crank the complexity knob way, way up. The solid consensus for ages has been that once you get past a certain point, finding a perfect exact answer just can't be done. And that, right there, is the central question for this whole thing. What if that foundational proof, the one that has literally defined the borders of algebra for generations of mathematicians, isn't actually the final word? Okay, so to really grasp why this new claim is such a potential earthquake, we need to understand the old world order first. Let's take a look at the history of this so called impossible equation. So, this huge barrier, it actually has a name, Abel's impossibility theorem, from way back in 1824. And it's a massive cornerstone of modern algebra. Now, to be clear, it doesn't say you can't find an answer. It says there's no general formula, no single recipe you can use to get an exact answer using standard tools like addition, subtraction, square roots, cube roots, what are called radicals. For any equation of degree 5 or higher, the textbook has always said you have to settle for an approximation. And listen, this wasn't some random idea. You can see the history right here. Back in the 16th century, mathematicians were on a roll. They conquered third and fourth degree equations, but then they hit a wall. For centuries, nothing. Then, in 1824, Niels Henrik Abel drops his bombshell proof. Just a few years later, the legendary Every Scala comes along and, with his group theory, explains why it's impossible. And for the next 200 years, that was that. Game over. The book was closed. But some people see a do not enter sign as a challenge. So let's meet the mathematician who's stepping into the ring and claiming to have broken this 200-year-old barrier. This is Professor Murad Sultan Izwidi. He's put forward what he calls Izwidi's theorem, and the claim is huge, that it's a brand new method that can deliver exact symbolic solutions for these very equations that Abel and Galois said were unsolvable. What I find really fascinating is the mindset behind it all. This quote says everything. Instead of seeing Abel's theorem as this absolute unmovable wall, he saw it as a limitation of a specific system of rules. So he decided to find a new set of rules altogether. So, what is this new framework? Well, it's like he brought a whole new toolbox to the job. We're talking about concepts like recursive discriminant relations and hierarchical symmetry transformations. Now, look, you don't need to be a math whiz to get the main point here. The key takeaway is that this is a completely different system built from the ground up to do the very thing the old system was proven not to be able to do. All right, let's do a little head to head comparison here. Let's put the old way and the new claims side by side so you can really see what a massive shift this would be. And before we even touch the numbers, just look at the difference in philosophy. The classical approach is all about accepting that some things in math are just impossible. There are limits. Izwidi's approach, it completely rejects that fatalism and basically argues that every equation has an exact answer, just waiting for us to find it. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. Look at this. The old method says impossible. The new one claims exact symbolic solutions. The classical approach has to rely on computer approximations, basically really good guesses. This new method claims 100% symbolic accuracy, something you can check and prove with algebra. It's not just a tweak, it's a completely different way of thinking. So, the $1,000,000 question, how does it supposedly work? Let's take a quick peek under the hood, conceptually, without getting totally lost in the formulas. So first, let's remember why the old way gets stuck. The symmetries of these equations, their Galois groups, are just too incredibly complex. The math spirals into this massive information overload, forcing mathematicians to give up on exactness and just rely on approximations. And an approximation, no matter how good, is still a guess. This new approach completely flips that on its head. The secret sauce is something called a recursive formula. The simplest way to think about it is that the method gets the equation to solve itself, using its own built-in information to generate the answer in a clear step-by-step process. So here's the process in a nutshell. First, you set up a specific set of rules based on the very equation you're trying to solve. Second, you use those rules to churn out a series of new values, all of them being perfectly exact. And third, those final values you calculated, they literally reveal the precise exact roots of your original problem. No guesswork needed. So, let's say this holds up. It survives the intense scrutiny of the global math community. What would that actually mean? Well, the implications are, and I'm not exaggerating here, absolutely profound. First things first, it would mean a shift to perfect accuracy. For 200 years, any field that uses these equations, think physics, engineering, economics, has had to accept a certain amount of error because they were working with approximations. This new method claims it can wipe that error away completely. And that's the first revolution. It's a fundamental change, moving from the world of close enough to the world of perfectly right. The second shift is almost more of a philosophical one. It takes something that was famous for being impossible and turns it into just another problem we solved. It's a huge win for the idea that no problem is truly unsolvable. You just need to find the right tools. And this really sums up the whole story we've talked about today. It's a journey from a historic limitation that defined an entire field to a potential revelation that claims that limit never really existed in the first place. So, we're left with this huge question. If Ezouidi's theorem stands the test of time, it means one of the great unsolvable puzzles in the history of science has just been solved. And it suggests that maybe, just maybe, when it comes to the power of algebra, there's no final limit at all.